What is the shadow self? Kylie from Embody Nadora, which is your space to come home to who you are and embody your truest self. Now, this is the third video in this Shadow and Ego Self series. You can find the other parts and more on our channel if you wish, and a multitude of tools and resources on our website. If you are interested, you can find the link below. So this video is focusing on the shadow aspect of self, which symbolizes what we have rejected about self or are taught is wrong. The shadow is everything that we have denied in ourselves, or rather, all the things that the ego has refused to associate with, but that we are still noticing in others and still triggers our instinctual reactions. And although this is separate from ego and often kept quite subdued, it has a powerful expression that can break down the defenses of the ego, because through accepting these shadow aspects, we then drop the belief that we need to be something different, something other than what we are. We are both light and shade, and we will most easily recognize these shadow qualities by what it is that we project onto others, which again is the soul's way of attempting to bring our attention to something. So when you turn away from what is within you and look outwards, you will still recognize these aspects of yourself in others, so that you can begin to have an awareness of what they are. Okay, so let's jump in deep. We are born as complete and whole beings, but over time, throughout our childhood, we learn from society that some things are good and acceptable, while others are bad and unacceptable. And we start to separate ourselves into these general roles of the ego, the witness, and the shadow self. We allow what is acceptable in society to be seen by others, and we bury all the things that are considered to be not acceptable. But buried doesn't mean vanquished. These things are still within us, still a part of us, and these patterns and ideas of right and wrong continue to deepen over time based on how often each concept is reconfirmed for us. Now, just like with the ego self, modern spirituality suggests that the shadow should be overcome or ignored. Terms such as love and light or all love and blessings are quite common in spiritual circles, but are potentially reflecting only the joyous virtues of love, peace, and harmony. But this is only really a part of who we are, and it ignores our deeper, darker elements as not only unhealthy but crazily naive, because it creates a judgmental way of seeing ourselves that we will often push out then onto others. But the higher self, the soul self, the witness, and the watcher within us knows better. And so when we let this aspect of self lead, we can find a much more complete and holistic path for knowing ourselves and expressing ourselves in the world in our truest form. So again, instead of ignoring our shadow self, we can choose to understand it, because it too has a purpose and a reason, and just like all other things, like all other parts of ourself, it just wants to be loved, and we can learn to do that if we choose to. When we willingly illuminate the shadow within us, shining light and compassion all over it, it disintegrates the fears that we have around things like rejection and abandonment and safety, security, and belonging. So this term, shadow self, was first coined by Carl Jung when he was looking at why seemingly good people do obviously bad things. And then he used the shadow term to represent all those expressions of self that we choose to reject and repress. Aware of it or not, the shadow is a part of us, but the less we embody of it in our conscious life, the denser, darker, and deeper it can be. But the moment we are aware of it, it begins to lighten. So it is always, always changeable, so long as it isn't repressed. And this is the key to this kind of self-work, to let the shadow aspect rise on their own while being fully conscious of them and not fearful. This again can be done by just remaining the watcher outside of these thoughts. Any push to try and suppress or deny shadows is the only thing that keeps the shadow in existence, meaning that the very resistance towards the shadow is what gives the shadow any power. This is called ironic process theory, which is where trying to ignore a thought actually makes you think about it more. So by denying our shadow, we are denying a part of self, but flipping that just means opening up and giving space to these shadow thoughts and feelings when they arise with the intention of understanding them. Where do they come from? What do they want? And are they even rational? And this is what leads to a greater understanding of our complete self, our true self, because we get comfortable with becoming conscious of the unconscious, and then we kind of wrap up this little gift for ourselves of power of conscious choice in each moment. So fighting or resisting our shadow side, our darker thoughts and emotions, gives them cause to feel ignored, and so they will attempt to make their voice heard and their existence felt just by getting in your face, which means they will show up from within the unconscious, and they will play themselves out in our relationships and in our external situations and experiences. And then if we are still choosing to deny them, even when they're right in front of us, we fall into a cycle of victimhood in which we go into defense mode and blame others to justify our actions based on someone else's wrongness or recklessness. Owning them instead of resisting them means we have nothing to defend against, nothing to fear, and nothing to excuse ourselves from. We can't be hurt by them because we can now identify with them. And this is the paradox of shadow work. To be free of our shadow, we have to learn to lean into it, to stabilize the repressed emotions and rejected identities that make up this darker side of ourselves, and to ultimately then become the shadow. This is why shadow work takes massive amounts of courage, self-compassion, and conscious intention, because it is uncomfortable, but such deep and difficult work always provides the greatest rewards. And this is why I say that the shadow should be celebrated and appreciated, because we need these difficult times and these difficult feelings and these uncomfortable moments to take us to that brink of what we believe about ourselves, so that we can get a new view and a new perspective, and then grow into that belief as well, and then repeat the process. That's growth, that's evolution, and that's like necessary to maintain health and well-being across every level, again, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. It's the process that we are a part of, this whole evolutionary movement. Leaning into your shadow helps you unwrap your creative and innovative potential and increase your physical and mental health. It helps bring clarity to relationships and our role within them, because you find personal responsibility for how you show up in life, in your relationships, for how you feel, and then for the results that you perceive within your experiences. Ultimately, what you're finding is balance between the labeled of good and bad parts of yourself, and then you just get to see yourself as whole. Now, this discomfort from this work comes from acknowledging that on the inside, we are all a little bit sad or lonely or wounded or impulsive or isolated. But because these deep feelings can be a source of emotional wealth and strength and resilience, it can be our pathway to healing and living a truly authentic life. But this requires conscious and intentional shifting from running from our past programming on autopilot, and to sink into the things that sit below the surface. What are these unheard feelings wanting to tell you? What do they need? What do they want? Taking time to ask these kinds of questions and honoring all the answers is how we can learn to fulfill a lot of our emotional needs for ourselves. Maybe you need to learn to trust your own authority, or to set some boundaries, or to recognize your own value. This kind of internal dialogue with these parts of yourself that have been denied will help you feel seen and heard and at ease with who you really are. Now, to help you recognize your shadow, there are three main things that most of us do every day to deny this part of ourselves. These are that we rationalize, meaning we try to justify our actions in order to make the parts of ourselves that we don't like come across completely normal and valid. Secondly, we reject, meaning that we deny these things entirely and refuse to see it in ourselves. This is choice. And this also limits what we are able to see in others, because with rejection, we reject, judge, and dismiss these qualities in not only ourselves, but in other people. And then finally, we project, meaning that we cast onto others the behaviors and qualities that we don't accept within ourselves. Understanding these three practices can help you integrate and own your own shadow and make the unconscious conscious. So if you catch yourself justifying certain behaviors, then this reveals something about a part of yourself that you are repressing, and until you make it conscious, you will continue to have no control over it. If you notice qualities that you reject in other people, this can indicate that you are rejecting these same qualities in yourself. And what isn't a part of us doesn't resonate with us at all. So if we're able to see it, then we are it. But if it upsets you, then it is a part of you that you are refusing to see, hence the discord in resonance. It is what causes us to feel agitated. When you focus on the qualities of others as things you like or don't like, this can be indicative of qualities you don't like about yourself. It's much easier to project those qualities onto other people rather than recognize them in ourselves. And when it comes to our shadow, it isn't about the bad stuff. It's not just the bad stuff. We can also project the qualities that we don't have the courage to own in ourselves. And in doing this, we're like setting ourselves these safe little limits and boundaries and projecting them onto someone else. We give this potential gift of expression and expansion away. So own your shadow, see it, love it, celebrate it, because working with your shadow can help you to stop living reactively and unconsciously and instead shift you into a state of being conscious, where you're a conscious responder to whatever life is bringing you. And what's more powerful than that, right? So follow me now to the fourth and final video in this series, where we will focus on the higher self, the soul self, and uncover more about your journey back home to who you are.